Boker Tov, everyone. No, I didn't get new glasses. I forgot to switch my glasses from my computer. These are what they call computer glasses. Great concept, by the way. If you are somebody with a problem seeing close up, like a computer, and you have and you work a lot at the computer, and you have progressives, well, I can't stress enough how much you'll enjoy getting computer frames, which are really just their own kind of animal, and you put them on when you're sitting at the computer. Gives you a much wider, larger vision frame. So anyway, that's and I did order new glasses. Actually, I used what's that called? Warby. I ordered glasses online. Got my prescription from LensCrafter's doctor over there in Poughkeepsie at the Galleria, and then ordered them online through Warby. It was a great experience. I was able to try on at home, like 10 different frames. Could have done more till I found one I liked. And what's nice is you can show different people and ask different people's impressions. You can come back and look at them again and again. And when you're finally ready, you just pick the ones you liked and send them I sent a screenshot, a scan really, of my prescription from the doctor, and voila, less money, so nice. Anyway, I am actually wanted to talk to you about something I've spoken about before, and I've had various times I've actually thought this out verbally in parts. I'm wondering if I can't put it together in my head by talking into a collective. So here's the notion. And boy, do I look like I need sleep. I guess I do. I don't know. Anyway, or maybe I'm just getting old. Could that be it, folks? Could I be getting old? What do you think? Yeah, I'm getting older. Anyway, here's the thing. We're living in the 20's. Yeah, I know. Of course we're living in the 20's, but I'm saying in another sense, we're living in the 20's. And I mean the 1920s. Going into the 1930s, which ultimately leads to not a good thing. So here's why. A lot of different forces are happening here, not just the tendency of history to repeat itself. There's, in the 20s, in Germany, actually it started in 1917, we had the Weimar Republic. And this is what you see depicted in the movie movie with Joel Grey, Cabaret. Remember the burlesque, just the real moral decay of society, and at the same time, you had an intellectual rise. So you had the academics, and you had a real morality decay, and you had people living it up. You had people living it up, and a lot of stresses that came from that, but a lot of business and a lot of excitement, and a lot of, they call it the Roaring 20s. Now, of course, there was another factor involved, and that was the stock market. And you had the dramatic rise in stocks. So we have that today. We have this moral decay, similar to the 20s, worse. We have stocks, and we have what's going to lead up to runaway inflation, which is monetary policy, which is leading up to runaway inflation. And then we have who plays Nazi Germany in this picture? The CCP. So the CCP, communism is Hitler. All right, it's the Nazi regime. Now we already know that there's things that they did with the virus, but there's more than that. There's things that are going on in their laboratories, which if you read reports that they did in 2011 and they didn't report again as they were supposed to in 2016, I believe it was, about what they're doing in these laboratories. They are engineering viruses. They're collecting DNA, and they're practicing genocide in their own country now. But they're also developing eugenics. They're building a superior military race, force genetically, soldiers genetically. One of the big concerns about the Olympics was they were going to harvest Olympians' DNA, and there was a lot of calls by thinkers to do things, and we had to do things to protect our DNA. This is not coming from me, by the way. There's papers out there that talk about how they're developing the ability to target with biological weapons people by race, by ethnicity. So, they could have a virus that is particularly targeted at, let's say, blacks or Anglo-Saxons or Hispanics or what have you. In fact, it's my proposition, it's my belief that the virus was an internal way of killing older people in their country. It was a biological weapon and a way to eliminate their older, affirmed population in China. They went away from the one-child policy as a means of population control, and I think they were matching that, replacing that with a biological way of releasing a virus and essentially using it to eliminate, to disappear the older and infirm population that is not productive in the workforce and is a drain on their social services. So if they can have much older, much younger, healthier population, think about the competitive advantage that gives them. I believe the virus was a eugenic strategy that got loose. Now, maybe it got loose on purpose, maybe it didn't. But I believe ultimately it was a play on eugenics. And I think they're doing that in a big way. So who does that remind you of? Right? The final solution. Now keep in mind that Nazi Germany was an archetype. Hitler was an archetype to Satan. He was a shadow of Satan, or maybe he was satanic. But the point of it is that as soon as he was put down after the war, Satan always pops back up again, always comes back up until he's put down for 1,000 years. But the point of it is, he popped up in the form of the CCP immediately after the war, in the way of the Mao Communist Revolution that killed. Mao starved tens and tens and tens of millions of his own people. Look what he's doing to the Uyghurs. That is genocide. The world is waking up to that. Okay? So if this is a country that does this, I mean, they prosecute dissidents, sentence them to death, take them out in firing squads, and they have trucks with doctors as soon as they're shot, taking their organs out. This is the systemic murder and organ harvesting. This is a country that will do it will do what Nazi Germany did without batting an eye for power. Okay, so you've got that, and then you've got what Europe did with Hitler. What the attitude was, we'll let them just take, Austria. We'll let them go into these countries because let's just satisfy Hitler and keep the peace, right? Well, that's what Roosevelt was doing, in the 30s. He campaigned on keeping the peace, not sending our boys to war, really. And we looked the other way, and we let Hitler get too powerful. We waited too long, and we're doing that today. Okay? So then you need a crisis. You need some sort of stock market crash. because ultimately it's systemic failure that throws the world into a war. A systemic failure then needs a catalyst. So it's like a catalyst of an environment needs a catalyst, like an assassination or what have you. Okay, so then you know that you also need what's the financial systemic failure is going to be monetary. It is happening right now. In fact, the IMF and central banks are moving towards a great expansion of a use of what are called SDRs, acronym, for essentially printing money and giving it out to countries. Right? So developed countries that are participants in the IMF dole out money, which is really just printed. It is literally computer-generated money. Now, what's that money going to be in the shape of eventually? It's going to be in the form of digital currency. Okay, so there's your mark potentially. There's your mark of the beast, because you won't be able to buy or sell. So you're going to have this massive inflationary run generated by essentially massive quantities of liquidity. All right, what our government is not being honest with us right now. What are they not being honest about? So in Congress, you hear this question that is asked, well, to something like the $1.9 trillion infrastructure plan. So people ask, well, how are we going to pay for it? Right? Well, that's a legitimate question. What's not legitimate is the answer. The answer is a lie. They talk about taxes, and yes, they are going to create this world tax across the board, a minimum 15% corporate tax. There will be taxes because ultimately it is about wealth distribution. Okay, so, I mean, you had wealth distribution in Nazi Germany. How was the wealth distributed? All the wealth of 6 million Jews, the largest Jewish population in the world was in Europe. You had the wealth of 6 million Jews, which was substantial, redistributed. Not 15%, not 20, 30%, 100%. And by the way, not just revenue, not just taxes. Keep in mind, taxes on revenue is one percentage measurement, but people have things they're not generally taxed on, like their art and collectibles, their homes, and their savings. And that's a much larger sum. And they take all of that. They took all of that and they redistributed it. Okay? And that was their way of essentially coming up with free money. Okay? And of course, they also printed money. And as we all know the stories about wheelbarrows to buy a loaf of bread and whatnot. But right now, we're generating massive, massive amounts of fiat currency. Now, fiat being fake, unbacked money. Now, here we go. What is money backed by? The lie is that they say, well, we're going to tax this, we'll move it from here. That's the lie. The truth of the answer is we're not going to pay it back. That's the honest answer. If you had somebody who had asked you for $100, $1,000, $10,000, and had absolutely no ability to pay it back. In fact, they were so in the hole it was pathetic. Worse yet, they were promising promises all over the place. Okay? And you knew there was no future revenue potential for this person to pay you back. And you asked the question, how are you going to pay it back? And they said to you, oh, well, I'm going to get a second job, or I got this money coming in from this person. You'd know it's a lie. You wouldn't give them the money. You'd know it's a lie. The truth of the answer is, I'm not going to be able to pay you back. I mean, I just won't be able to pay you back. So if you'd like to give me the money, then please give me the money. Well, the Congress is not being honest. Frankly, Democrats, but also Republicans, they're not being honest. They're making the illusion is that this monetary policy is based on the notion that money is coming from the government is money coming from us, right? Money coming from the taxpayers. But the problem is, at this point, the taxpayers don't have it. And not only that, this generation doesn't have it. You'd actually have to be looking at your children and your grandchildren. So we're going into hock on debts that can't be repaid, and people are not admitting it. All right? This is a formula for disaster. At some point, well, what becomes the trigger? What becomes the trigger for this? So what if, I'm proposing to you, what if what I said in the beginning about China, the whole world comes to the realization of? What happens, like in the 20's, when we move into the point where the world realizes that the stock market is overly valued because a new reality has kind of come into play? What happens when the market crashes at that point? Well, what's also another new reality that could be a catalyst for this? What happens when the world realizes that the CCP is Nazi Germany? What happens when the truth gets out about the eugenics that they're doing? What happens when the truth gets out about their ambitions for expansion and world dominance? What happens when we have to confront them? Okay, well, here's why it's a crisis that's worse. First of all, Hitler didn't have nuclear weapons. He didn't have biological weapons. Okay, maybe he had mustard gas and some few other things, but he really didn't have the mass destruction capability. The world could defeat Hitler, and it did. And Providence played a part in that. But what about China? What's the world going to do with 10 more years or 8 more years or whatever it is of China expanding, of it's not fighting the war. They said they wouldn't. They're not fighting a war with us the way we expect them to fight a war. Our military are underestimating them, just like the French underestimated the Vietnamese. Okay, just like the British underestimated us at Bunker Hill, just like a lot of things. We have a habit of assuming how people are going to fight a war. And then when they fight it in an altogether different way and they surprise us and we get a crushing defeat, like Pearl Harbor, it's a wake-up call. What happens when we wake up and realize that China has embedded back doors in an incredible amount of our telecommunications system, of our electric grid? What happens when we realize how dependent we are from them on a supply chain? What happens when we realize that they do have biological weapons that they can release that we do not have vaccines for? How is it that China had a vaccine in February, I believe it was, of 2020? How? They're not known for their enormous medical advances. How did they have a vaccine in January, February of 2020, folks? 2020. Do the math on this. Look at the dates. How is it? Because they were researching not just the virus, they were researching vaccines. Because if you're going to release a virus, you better have a way to protect your people at the time. And they did. Look at the data on their deaths. Either they're lying or they knew and they were prepared. Or both. So, what happens when the world realizes the threat that China really plays the way the world realized that Nazi Germany was the threat? What happens when America is forced to confront China militarily? Well, what happens first and before that, quite frankly, is markets Markets react first. Markets are faster than governments in moving into defensive positions. When the world wakes up to what China is, the world wakes up, the markets wake up first to the implications of it. And there you have your crash. When? Well, I think right now monetary policy is pouring on. SDRs, central banks. All right. The next thing that will hear is that we have shifted our monetary policy to modern monetary theory, and they're going to make an argument that it's okay to print the money. That will be the argument. If I'm right, that's the next thing. The next thing you're hearing, and you are already, it is out there if you're researching it, is that this is okay. This is perfectly okay to just print money. So then the question is, well, what backs money? Well, this should be an easy economics question for everyone, an easy history lesson. What backs our money here in America? Figured it out? In God we trust. Now, let's add into this equation that that's a bogus statement too. It's a bogus statement as a nation. There was a time when it was very true. If you go back and read the charters of everything from Massachusetts, the Constitution, the Magna Carta, the Pilgrim's Compact, the Pennsylvania Constitution, if you go back and read the charter of Harvard College, Columbia, you could go into all of them and you will find that they were rooted in God. America nearly used Hebrew. There was some push, it wasn't very popular, but there was some people that believed that we should make Hebrew our language in America at the very beginning. Hard to believe, but it's true. Okay, we are a nation that's founded on principles of God. Puritan, sometimes maybe harsh. Okay, you know, if you look at the story that Kohelet wrote, presumably Solomon wrote, Solomon had, I want to say 300 wives and, I don't know, 1,000 concubines or something like that. The man could literally eat every meal of every day with a different wife, if you would want to do that. Okay, he never had to know the same woman twice if he didn't want to. All right, but at the end of his life, he wrote that it's all meaningless. Essentially, that's the meaning of Ecclesiastes. He came to the conclusion, despite his massive wealth, his incredible fortune in every way, he decided it's all meaningless. Kohelet's a very sad story that talks about the only true purpose in life is obedience to God. So anyway, what happens when our nation realizes that our money, which hasn't been backed by anything except for faith, no longer has faith? You see, all these things correlate. I told you before that I was trying to put together in words, in just speaking the spoken word, a number of little factors. Each one of them are big factors into one sort of cohesive premise or theory. So what's the conclusion? Well, it kind of goes back to the beginning and to the end. And if you're somebody who is a faithful person, if you spend a lot of time in the Word, I don't need to say any more than that. Timing-wise, I think we have some really, really fun roaring 20s. But you better be good with God, I think. You better start making yourself, getting yourself comfortable in a relationship with God. Start letting the Spirit of God in you guide you. I am trying. It's not easy to sort of make I guess what would be considered a Christian comment. I am a sinner. I know I'm a sinner. And I do need to repent. And that's really where we've gotten ourselves in trouble as Jewish people, as a nation, as a world. But we can't, I can't change the world. I'm not even going to change you. So I just need to do my own little part. Well, anyway, those are my thoughts for the morning. It's still the Roaring 20s. Take care.